بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نرحب بكم جميعا في هذا اللقاء، وهو ضمن أنشطة قسم إدارة الأعمال في ندوة لقسم إدارة الأعمال بشكل شهري. وفي هذه الندوة هذا الشهر في البداية طبعا نرحب بكم أجمل ترحيب، نرحب بالزملاء الأساتذة أعضاء الهيئة التدريسية، ونرحب بالطلبة الأعزاء. أهلا بكم جميعا، ودعوني باسمكم أن أرحب بالدكتور محمد فايز بطاينة من كلية الحجاوي قسم الاتصالات. دكتور محمد سيحدثنا في هذا الوقت حول موضوع في غاية الأهمية، وموضوع أيضا مثير للانتباه، وهو بعنوان Exponential Thinking and Disruptive Innovations. وهذا الموضوع هو ذو صلة في البزنس وفي الإدارة وفي أيضا محاور مختلفة اقتصادية. نشكره على تلبيته لهذه الدعوة، ونرحب به مرة أخرى، وسنترك المجال له لكي يوضح لنا هذا المفهوم اللي هو جديد ومعاصر. وبعد 45 دقيقة تقريبا من الإلقاء لهذا الموضوع سنفتح الباب لكم للأسئلة والاستفسار والتعليق حول هذا الموضوع. فنرحب مرة ثانية وندعوه ليتفضل مشكورا. أهلا وسهلا دكتور.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for being here today and for having the curiosity. Can you guys hear me well? Can you hear me? Okay. For having the curiosity to see what this is all about. Okay, and I would like to thank Dr. Yahya Malhan for inviting me to present the exponential war to you guys. I would also like to thank the president of Yarmouk University, Professor Faouri, for believing in this, for being enthusiastic about this, and for having the determination to turn this whole linear to exponential or transformation of our beloved Yarmouk University into reality. Okay, so I would also like to dedicate special thanks for Engineer Ayman Hajjawi, whose late father is the one who established our Faculty of Engineering, and which was named after him, actually, for granting us this priceless opportunity to get us all exposed to this exponential mentality thing, and to get us all infected by this amazing bug. We're all infected now by this bug, and hopefully by the end of my presentation today, we're going to get each and every one of you infected as well. Okay. So I will start by this quote by Salim Ismail. Salim Ismail is the executive president of the Singularity University. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Singularity University. The Singularity University is a think tank in Silicon Valley, California. He says that in today's corporate world, there's a new breed of institutional organism, the exponential organization, loose on earth. And if you don't understand it, prepare for it, and ultimately become it, you will be disrupted. And by disrupted, I mean that you're going to disappear. You're not going to be around there tomorrow. Your business model is going to disappear, and you're going to be removed to the heap ash of history where nobody would care about you. Okay. So in my presentation, I will begin with 3 failure stories, okay, and then I will explain the linear exponential deception. I'll talk about the change that we're seeing in the world of technology and how to make sense of that. I will talk about what is happening in the world of education. I will explain the concept of disruptive innovation and what is happening in the world of education, and I will finish by how to be exponential, how ourselves can be exponential thinkers, and how we can teach our students to be exponential thinkers. Okay. So my first story is about iridium. Anybody heard about iridium? Can I see a raise of hands? Iridium. Actually, iridium, if you go back to the periodic, if you guys are aware of chemistry, it is one of the chemical elements. It's called iridium. Its atomic number is 77. I mean, how this is connected to my story, Iridium is an American company that was spun out by Motorola to launch 77 satellites around the globe to provide mobile telephony at one price, no matter the location. And the reason they decided to do this is because the cost of installing cell phone towers at that time was too expensive to blanket out the vast majority of the landscape. It was costing them $100,000 to establish each cell phone tower. So the project started in the late 80s, took 12 years to be operational, cost them $5 billion. But guess what? In those 12 years, network speeds were increasing by orders of magnitude. The cost of cell phone towers was dropping exponentially. The GSM grew so quickly that it totally replaced their dreams and ambitions of building a satellite mobile network. And Iridium turned to be a spectacular failure and a dramatic victim for the technological innovation that took place due to their misjudgment regarding cell phones. Okay, so that was my first story. My second story about Nokia. Nokia was the largest and the most profitable cell phone manufacturer at a certain point in time. But Nokia, actually, they were the ones who invented touch screens. But even though they failed to exponentially grow with the trends and demands of the market, and the whole industry collapsed in terms, they could not grow exponentially with the trends and demands of the market. I'll tell you a very interesting story about Nokia. In 2007, Nokia paid $8.1 billion to purchase a navigation company called Navteq. And they thought that by doing so, they will utilize the GPS sensors that are distributed all over the world, and that would give them a strong competitive weapon in terms of mobile mapping and traffic information. They will dominate this field. But unfortunately for Nokia, there was a startup, an Israeli startup company called Waze, which found a much easier and cheaper way to gather traffic information. They crowdsourced location data from the GPS sensors on people's smartphones. So they accessed information already available on people's smartphone. So now look at this. Nokia, in 2013, Nokia paid Google paid $1.1 billion to purchase Waze. Okay, now look at this. Nokia paid a fortune to acquire Navteq, which is a navigation company. Okay, and Waze already accessed information already available on people's smartphone for free. So Nokia's approach is characterized as linear thinking. Waze's approach is characterized as exponential thinking. So that gives you an idea of what is the difference between linear thinking and exponential thinking. Okay? Accessing resources that you don't own is a way of exponential thinking. So that was Nokia. Kodak also failed to see the exponential growth that happened in the digital world. What you might not know about Kodak is that they were the ones who invented the first digital camera. I don't know if you guys know this guy. Anybody knows who this guy is? This guy, this gentleman here is called Steven Sasson. He worked for Kodak, and he was the one who invented the first digital camera ever, which seems a little bit clunky. The resolution of this camera is 0.01 megapixels, which means that photographs taken by this camera are 100 pixels by 100 pixels. If you compare this, for example, to my iPhone 6 Plus photographs, which are 8 megapixels in resolution, each photograph here is 8 million pixels by 8 million pixels. So if you compare 100 pixels by 100, so you can imagine how terrible and horrible that is. Okay. In 2012, Kodak declared their bankruptcy after having invented and then rejected the digital camera. They could only see the resolution. When this guy took this invention to Kodak, they could only see the zero resolution at that time, okay? And that's why they decided to hold the development at that time. What Kodak failed to see is that resolution was moving in a perfect exponential trend that was doubling in capacity and performance every year. So if they waited for 9 years, they will reach the 2 megapixels. You start by 0.01 megapixel. Next year is going to be double that. It's 0.02, and then 0.04, and then 0.08, and then 0.16, 0.32, 0.64, 1.28, 2.56, and that's when you reach the 2 megapixels, that's when you no longer buy a film camera anymore. And that's when chemical photography was disrupted and digital photography took over. So in 2012, Kodak declared their bankruptcy after having invented and they rejected the first digital camera ever. This caricature here shows a very funny but yet heartbreaking picture of how everybody was using a digital camera to record the failure moment of Kodak when they declared their bankruptcy in 2012. Actually, by the same time Kodak was closing its doors, a startup company called Instagram, 3 years in business with 13 employees, they were acquired by Facebook by $1 billion. Ironically, this happened while Kodak still owned the patents for digital photography. So now, looking at these 3 failure stories, can you tell what is common between the 3 failure stories? They all failed to see the exponential growth that happened in the digital world, in the world of technology. Iridium failed to see the exponential growth that happened in the GSM. They anticipated that cell phones are going to disappear and that satellite phones are going to take over. So they were wrong about that. The GSM grew so quickly that it totally replaced their dreams and ambitions. Nokia failed to exponentially grow with the trends and demands of the market. Kodak failed to see the exponential growth that happened in the digital world. So they all failed to see the exponential trend that was happening in the world of technology. They all did the same mistake. They used linear tools and trends of the past to predict an accelerating world. Okay, now here's the challenge. Albert Allen Bartlett, it becomes now fundamentally important to understand this whole exponential behavior taking place. Albert Allen Bartlett, who taught at UC Boulder, University of Colorado at Boulder, he says that the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. So let me explain this, and they call this the linear exponential deception. As we grew up as humans, the world around us is linear. The observable universe moves on a linear path. So the day has 24 hours. The year has 365 days. The seasons come and go on a very predictable linear schedule. Now, if I ask you to take 30 linear steps, like each step at a time, how far would you get? 30 meters. It's super easy. It's predicted. Especially that we've got good sense of how far that is. For me, I would think it's probably going to be by the end of the door, by the end of the hall, or a little bit farther. So that's easy. Now, if I ask you to take 30 exponential steps, so each step is twice as far as the previous step. Okay, so instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, you go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on and so forth. So in 30 exponential steps, how far would you get? Can I have any guesses? 2 to the power 29, that's right. And that's how much? Give me an estimate. It's 1 billion meters. It's 1 million kilometers. That's enough for you to go around the planet Earth 25 times. That's to the moon, back from the moon, and to the moon again halfway. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of what is the difference, what is the big difference between linear and exponential. So we'll cover this a little bit as we go. So these are exponential trends. This is linear thinking. Now looking at this graph, there are 3 important points. The first point is, it's called disappointment. Because, exponential trends, they start out very slowly at the beginning. They inch forward at the beginning. And because our linear mind wants them to be bigger, so that's why we come to a word of disappointment. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Google Glass. But the first time Google released their Google Glass, they were very expensive. Battery life was terrible. Functionality was pretty poor, and you look like an idiot wearing them. So if somebody gives you a Google Glass at that time, you will dismiss it. You'll get disappointed, and you'll dismiss it, because to you it's not good, and it's not going to be good. So you come to a word. This is a classic case of disappointment. And then comes the second point, where the linear curve crosses the exponential trend, and that's called the iPhone moment. And that's when Steve Jobs got on stage and showed the whole world the iPhone for the very first time. All the people that attended the keynote speech of Steve Jobs at that particular day, they looked at their brand new Nokia phones, and they threw them away because they never compared with the magical iPhone. The iPhone was more of a mini computer rather than a regular phone. So everything changed from that moment. And then comes the third point, which is chaos and amazement. Chaos and amazement is the word that we're living in right now. Today, smartphone penetration in Kenya is 7%. In 3 years, that number is going to go up to 90%. So in 3 years, all of Kenya is going to be online, on the internet. So that's chaos and amazement. See, if we look at the yellow curve here, like if we talk about the digital photography, when Kodak started, the resolution was 0.01 megapixel, and then it was 0.02, 0.04. When it arrives this point, at this particular point there, it was 2 megapixels, and that's when you no longer buy a digital camera anymore. But anybody who's looking at the resolution that is growing here in this region gets disappointed, and that's why he dismisses like the technology. That's why Kodak decided to halt the development at that particular time, because they could only see the 0 resolution at that time. But if they waited like for 9 years, then the resolution will grow and reach the 2 megapixels, and that's when you no longer buy a film camera anymore. That's when the technology becomes disruptive. The digital photography. Kodak disappeared. They declared their bankruptcy in 2012. Okay. So now, if you decide to stay linear in this whole accelerating world, then that's your path to doom in your thinking. You will disappear. Your business model is going to disappear. You're not going to be around there tomorrow. You're going to be out of the game, and you're going to be removed to the heap ash of history where nobody would ever care about you. And that's exactly what happened to Iridium, Nokia, and Kodak. They all did the same mistake, as I said. They used linear tools and trends of the past to predict an accelerating world. That's the mistake that they did. Okay, so now talking about future exponentials and the future being exponential, let's unpack this term a little bit. It's kind of a weird term, but if you think back to your Math 101 class, you'll find that exponential trends doubling every time period, if you meet that out, it's going to always look something like this. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, you go 1, 2, 4, 8, and so on and so forth. And probably one of the most important and well-known exponential trends in the world of technology is known as Moore's Law. Moore's Law, this is Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel. 50 years ago, he formulated a law that is called the that was named after him, Moore's Law, which says that in the last 10, he noticed that he published in a paper actually, he noticed that the number of transistors per square inch in integrated circuits was doubling every year. And then he predicted that's going to be true for the next 10 years. And then he revised his for observation to be true, to be doubling like every 2 years. And this has been true for the last 50 years. Like for example, if you can put a transistor now per square inch, next year that's going to double. So you can put 2 transistors, and then 4, and then 8, 16, 32, and so on and so forth. And that has been true for how long? 50 years. So that's called Moore's Law. So to make this a little bit tangible and to give you an idea of how this looks like, this is ASCII Red. ASCII Red was commissioned to, in 1997, cost $55 million. That was one of the most powerful computers that was commissioned to Sandia National Laboratories. They did atomic weapon testing using this thing. This computer here was the size of a tennis court, okay? And it was one of the first computers that broke through 1.3 teraflops. That's 1.3 trillion floating point operations. So if you want to have a sense of that, imagine that you would do 1 trillion. Trillion is 1 million millions, 10 to the power 12. So imagine that you would do 1.3 million mathematical operations like addition, adding 2 numbers, 2 and 2, in your head in 1 second. Imagine that that's what this computer could do. So 1.3 teraflops. So that was ASCII Red, 1997. 9 years later, you walk into Best Buy, you buy PlayStation 3, which was commissioned by the end of 2006, cost you $499 with 2.1 teraflops. That's even more compute power, okay? And so you go from something that you deploy to do atomic weapon testing with to something that you can play and destroy the earth on a big screen television. So you go from something from $55 million, 1.3 teraflops, to $499 with even more compute power. And there's a different way too. This guy here is called the Pi Zero. This is a full scale. By the way, this is a full, which was released by the end of 2015, which is a full scale computer. It is the size of a credit card. Can you imagine that? Which you can plug to a monitor and a keyboard, and you can put some RAM in, and you can run Windows on this thing. Cost you how much? $5. The compute power of this guy here is literally what you get for the price of a large Starbucks latte. Gets you 2.5 Cray 1 supercomputers. Each one of those has more compute power than NASA has to put the man on the moon. So with $5, you buy the Pi Zero, whose compute power is equivalent to 2.5 Cray 1 supercomputers. Each one of those has more compute power than NASA has to put the man on the moon. And then you get super, super small. This is a golf ball here. This processor here is 2 millimeters by 1.6 millimeters. Okay? The compute power of this processor here is better than early stage Pentium processors. This processor here and many other processors like it is the sole reason why everything is going to be smart. No question about it. So what I'm trying to say is that computing gets two interesting ways. It gets incredibly powerful and it gets incredibly smart. Okay, and now it's also important to understand that exponential trends are not only happening to computing, it's also happening to many other industries. For example, the number of internet-connected devices. Okay, in 2003, we had 500 million internet-connected devices. In 2012, that number went up to 8.7 billion internet-connected devices. Today, in 2017, we have 28.4 billion internet-connected devices. By 2020, that number is going to rise up to 50 billion internet-connected devices. By 2030, we're going to have 1 trillion internet-connected devices as we information enable every aspect of life by the Internet of Things, the IoT. Can you imagine the phenomenal amount of information that is going to be available out there when we are going to have 1 trillion? Trillion is like 1 million million internet-connected devices. Okay? That means that we're going to witness an explosion in the rate of innovation as millions of new innovators will start to experiment and upload their businesses, services, and products and launch their new businesses online. If you think that the rate of innovations have been fast in the recent years, well, let me be among the first to tell you that you have not seen anything yet. A world of chaos and amazement is still ahead of us. We are just 1% down this road. Okay, by 2030, we're going to have a 1 trillion. Now we are 50 billion. If you divide 50 billion by 1 trillion, it's like 1% or 2%. Okay, it is also important to understand that this exponential trends, this exponential behavior is also happening to many other industries, and I will just peel out one particular significant industry that will fundamentally change the way that we live our lives, and that is DNA sequencing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with DNA sequencing, that's biology. DNA sequencing is particularly, simply, basically, it's reading and writing your DNA. And the reason why this is important is that when you're able to read and write your DNA, then you can attack a cancer cell in a on a microscopic level, and literally you can kill that cell. You can eradicate diseases. You can create crops. You can copy and paste from the genomic structure as easy as you can copy and paste from a Word file. As simple as that. So the first time they did DNA sequencing was in 1999 in a project called the Human Genome Project. It cost them $2.7 billion to sequence the first human genome ever. Okay? And 7 years worth of effort. So it took them 7 years to sequence the first human genome with $2.7 billion. Can you imagine that? In 2007, that number went down to $350,000. There was a company that started to do DNA sequencing as professional and commercial service. So you go from something that you can only do once to something that is still expensive but a lot cheaper comparatively. In 2014, that number went down to $1,000. Today, that number went down to $100. So basically what you can do today, you can send your hair to the United States of America. They can extract your DNA, fully sequence it, send it back to you next day with like $100. So looking at the cost curve of DNA sequencing, you go from something from $2.7 billion in 1999 to $100 today. So looking at this curve brings out two extremely important questions. The first one is, if it is here, if the price is $100 today, how much would it be by 2020, for example? And you ask experts, and they'll tell you that it's going to go down to pennies. So reading your DNA will be something that you do for free. And the second extremely question, what do you do with it? What do you do with reading your DNA for free by 2020? And I'll give you two examples. The first one is this. In the future, and this is not hypothetical, once you flush your toilet, it's going to run a full genomic sequencing on everything that goes in there and will give you a full health report. Well, it sounds crazy, but this is really happening. These people are really working on it. There's a Japanese company that is working on toilets like this. By 2020, once you flush your toilet, it's going to give you a full health report. And the second question is this. Everybody of us is losing cells, skin cells, follicle, hair. We usually tend to leave some things behind, like a gum, like a cigarette butt. By the end of my presentation today, me and Dr. Yahya maybe, we'll hover here, collect everything that you guys left behind, take it to the lab, extract your DNAs, and then generate 3D masks of the face of everybody that was here or visited this place and accidentally left something behind. And if you think that I'm telling like science fiction, this is kind of a science fiction, let me have you watch this video.
want to think twice the next time you spit out your gum or drop a cigarette butt in public. New York artist Heather Dewey Hagborg might pick it up, extract the DNA, and turn it into a 3D face that could look like you.
A lot of my work begins with a question. In this particular case, the question was, what can I learn about someone from a single hair?
Once she finds a sample, she takes it to the lab to mine it for DNA and analyze the results.
From a cigarette butt, I can learn where someone's ancestors likely came from, their gender, eye color, hair color, complexion.
The information is fed into a computer program that generates a 3D model of a face.
The way that I'm using code here is a lot like how a sketch artist would use a pencil.
It takes about 8 hours to print in 3D at NYU's Advanced Media Studio. Then the excess powder is removed to reveal the disembodied face from a stranger's DNA. But there are limitations, like the length of a person's nose or shape of their face cannot be determined.
The faces have a general likeness. It might look like a family resemblance. Right now I can't determine age, so all of my masks are aged between 20 and 40.
Dewey Hagborg started the project called Stranger Visions after creating her self-portrait 2 years ago. Now she's hoping it will raise questions about genetic privacy.
It's meant to be an exploration at the intersection of art and technology and science, and it's meant to be a provocation.
Okay. So it sounds pretty wild, it sounds crazy, but this is really happening. And FBI has been doing this for the last 20 years. So what I'm trying to say is that we are rapidly moving into a world that would dramatically look different than the world we've seen and felt in our lifetime so far. This is Ray Kurzweil. He's one of the co-founders of the Singularity University. He formulated a law that is called the law of accelerating returns, which basically says that any technology, once digitized, once information enabled, then it moves on a perfect exponential trend that doubles in capacity and performance every year. And what Ray Kurzweil, he says that whenever you shift to an information-based environment, the pace of development jumps onto an exponential growth path, and that the price per performance that doubles every year or two. So the price element is reduced exponentially, and the performance grows exponentially every year or two, and that is verified. So what Ray Kurzweil did, he was interested to see how stable these trends over longer periods of time. So we knew from Moore's law, as I explained, that it was true for 50 years. But Ray Kurzweil, he was interested to see how this is stable over longer periods of time. So instead of looking at the number of transistors per square inch in integrated circuits, which you can only do when you have transistors, he looked at the number of calculations per second per $1,000. And he found out that the exponential trends are true for not only 50 years, as we know from Moore's law, it was also true for 110 years. So if this has been true for the last 110 years, then most likely it's going to be true for the next 110 years. So with what Ray Kurzweil did, he extrapolated that figure out, and he was able to define or to determine the point in time when we are going to have a computer that has the compute power of a human brain. And that's going to happen in 15 years from now, in 2030. And guess what? Because this is moving on a perfect exponential trend, so that is going to be doubling every year. So a year or 2 years. So 2 years from that, you're going to have a computer that has the compute power of 2 human brains, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. By 2050 or 2060, we're going to have a computer that has the compute power of the human brains of the 7.5 billion people living on Earth combined. Can you imagine that? Maybe we're not going to be by that time, but our kids are going to enjoy that glory. This is Siri. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Siri. I always talk to Siri, and whenever I talk to Siri, I get disappointed. Why? Because Siri does not fully understand me. But guess what? Siri, which is an artificial intelligence technology, is an exponential technology that moves on a perfect exponential trend that doubles in capacity and performance every year. So in 7 years, Siri is going to be 128 times better than it is today. So in 7 years, Siri is going to understand you better than anybody in the world, even your wives or your spouses. Can you imagine that? And this is not only happening to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, infinite computing, sensors, networks, robotics, digital manufacturing, biotechnology, bioinformatics, synthetic biology, digital medicine, neuroscience, data science, 3D printing, nanotechnology, and even aspects of energy. All these are exponential technologies that are doubling in capacity and performance every year. So the idea is that once a technology becomes digitized, it perfectly moves on a perfect exponential trend. So if you have something analog, if you turn it into digital, then it will perfectly move on an exponential trend. I mean, look, if we apply this to our education style, like we teach in classes, in ground classes, that's analog, right? But if we digitize that, if we go online, then we are going to start moving exponentially in that particular regard. And this brings us to the concept of disruptive innovation. A disruptive innovation is an innovation that creates a new market and value network and disrupts an existing value market and value network, displacing leading firms, products, and alliances. A disruptive innovation is not a breakthrough innovation that makes a product a lot better. No. It is an innovation that transforms a product that historically was very expensive to be affordable and accessible by large populations. Salim Ismail, who is executive president of the Singularity University, he says that an industry is disrupted when it fails to see the exponential trend that is happening in the world of technology. In this table, I have enlisted a lot of examples of disruptive innovations. For example, Wikipedia disrupted traditional encyclopedias. Okay? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Encyclopedia Britannica, but they ended their print production after 245 years in 2012. Why? Because Wikipedia provided free, it is based on volunteer people. I mean, its content is being updated, constantly updated every day. Telephony disrupted telegraphy. Smartphones disrupted personal computers and laptops. Digital photography, as I talked about, disrupted chemical photography. Hybrid cars disrupted automotive industry. Okay, so I'll just go through quickly through examples of disrupted industries. Retail industry is being disrupted by online shopping. Retailers like the giant Alibaba, Amazon, and Souq.com have been growing exponentially in the last 10 years, and they're going to continue to grow. In the next year, 3 years, for example, online shopping is going to exceed hundreds of billions of US dollars. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these two guys. These two guys are Jordanian, by the way. This guy is called Fadi Ghandour. He's the one who started Airmix, that's right. And both of these guys, Fadi Ghandour and Samih Touqan, they were the ones who started Souq.com, which was acquired by Amazon this year. You know for how much? Amazon acquired Souq.com this year for $800 million. See the exponential growth that is happening. Transportation is being disrupted by Uber. Uber is the largest taxi company in the world. Can anybody give a guess of how many taxis they own at the moment? 0 taxes. They don't own nothing. Exactly. They only own the application, actually, and they maintain it. So Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, and yet they don't own a single taxi. Today, the market valuation of Uber is $62 billion. Airbnb also, I don't know if you're familiar with Airbnb. Airbnb is the largest hotel company in the world, and yet they don't own a single hotel. Kareem also is an example of Uber, yeah. Airbnb, the market valuation of Airbnb today is $30 billion US dollars, and that's more than Hilton and Hyatt combined. Automotive industry is going to be disrupted by electric vehicles like Tesla car and Google car. Can you imagine when the electric vehicle, the Google car, which is called the bubble car, which is self-driven, by the way, and which is going to be autonomous, self-driven. There's no driver. Okay, it will be out there and ready to go, and which will eventually cost $1,000. The whole automotive industry will be disrupted. The whole transportation industry will be disrupted. The whole oil industry will be disrupted. Even the medicine industry is being disrupted. The need for doctors are being significantly impacted by the phenomenal amount of information that is available out there online or on the internet. A 14-year-old kid called Jack was able to find a medical solution for his uncle who was suffering from cancer by doing a Google search that was adopted and accepted by Johns Hopkins. That's one of the huge medical institutions in the world. So if 14 and 15 years old kid can start a medical research online, can you imagine in 10 years how that's gonna affect the whole, our need for doctors? Even the solar energy is moving on a perfect exponential trend. It dropped from $76 per kilowatt hour in 1977 to 3 cents last year per kilowatt hour. And that is going to continue reducing. So after all this, and looking at this exponentially accelerating world, do we really want to stay linear in this whole accelerating world? Because if we have not transformed ourselves from linear to exponential, if we stay linear in this exponentially accelerating world, then it will not only seem as though our competition is racing away from us, but that we are sliding backwards at the breakneck speed into oblivion. Bill Joy, and he's one of the visionaries in Silicon Valley, California, he says that the smartest people of the world will no longer work for you. You know why? Because they will work for themselves online. So they don't need to get hired by anybody. They are their own bosses. Salim Ismail, who is executive president of the Singularity University, he says that whenever you try to make a transformation from linear to exponential in any institution, then the immune system of the institution will come and attack you. Because they resist the change. Okay, they can't transform from linear to exponential overnight. They will resist the change because they're afraid of it. And the reason, and he says that the solution for this is to establish on the side, especially on the side, achieve exponential change, and then set an example, and then infect everybody else. That's the solution. And that's exactly what we're doing at the Hijawi faculty, actually. We have so far infected 3 courses, the special topics, the communication skills, and the introduction to engineering by the exponential mentality, exponential thinking thing. Okay, so now I will finish by this topic of how to be exponential. How can ourselves be exponential thinkers? How we can teach our students to be exponential thinker? And I have put some requirements that we need to work on. The first thing is that we need our students to have a good command of English. They need to be fluent in English. They need to understand English very well. Our kids are spending too much time online. So why not to utilize that time to learn a new skill, a new language, anything that can benefit them in their lives. By the way, there is an application that is called Babbel, which you can download on your smartphones. If our students know how to use that, how to utilize that, that would be phenomenal to learn English. We need to introduce online education as a culture in our institutions, and that's a must. And I know that the president of Yarmouk University is very serious about this, and there is like a project that is going on right now, that we are in the process of establishing an online education center that is going to start online education. So hopefully in 5 years maybe, we're going to be talking about online programs that they don't have to be, maybe, by the way, in the ground classes. They can be only online. Oh, that's our dreams. Okay. We need to let our students understand the available resources available on the internet. For example, Kaggle is a website or an application that you can download on your smartphone that looks for people that are capable of building mathematical algorithms for predictive modeling and analytics. And it's totally based on the idea of crowdsourcing. TaskRabbit is also a website or application that helps anybody find a job online from anywhere, anytime, from the comfort of his very home. All he needs is an internet connection. Kickstarter is a global crowdfunding platform that helps bring innovative projects into life. If you have an innovative idea and you don't have money, well, you can use Kickstarter to raise funds from people that you never met with, that don't know you, simply because they believe in your innovative idea. And you can bring your innovative project into life. Okay, LinkedIn is a professional social network where employers can post jobs and where job seekers can post their CVs. What I'm trying to say is that our students are totally oblivious of all this. They're unaware of all this. We need to let our students be aware of all this so that they become better onliners. I have enlisted here plenty of websites for crowdsourcing and for crowdfunding. I would be happy to share this presentation with you if you guys are interested. We need to hold contests and competitions and spread the spirit of innovation and interaction in the class between students. That's fundamentally important. We need to enhance active student participation and interaction in the class and spread the spirit of innovation. We need to review our curricula and adapt them to the real and future world and make them future-proof. At the Singularity University, Salim Ismail, he says at the Singularity University, 80% of the curriculum is about the future. Okay? Now in our traditional institutions, 90% of our curriculum is about the past. We're teaching students about the past. Like 90% of our education is about the past. At the Singularity example, which is like the extreme example, 80% of the curriculum is about the future. It's constantly being updated. And that's why the Singularity University was never accredited. Not because they didn't care, but because the curriculum was changing too fast. Okay, now I'll talk about what is happening in the world of education. Clayton Christensen of Harvard University, of Harvard School, he considered MOOCs. MOOCs is massive open online courses like edX, like Coursera, Udacity, these platforms that provide online education for free. He considers MOOCs a potent disruptive technology that will kill off many inefficient universities. He predicted last year that in 15 years, half of the American university will be in bankruptcy, because they're not going to go online. edX, Coursera, Udacity have so far provided courses to over 12 million students. Harvard University offers nearly 800 online courses, 25 degree fields, and over 30 certificates to help students meet their goals. Either develop specialized skills, prepare for a new career, or simply pursue their intellectual inquiry. EPFL is one of the best engineering schools in Switzerland, has an enrollment that grew from 10,000 students in 2013 to 40,000 students in 2016. The extra 30,000 students are all online. So, like for us, for Hijawi faculty for engineering technology, we have set like targets for ourselves. We need to reach 25% of online education by 2020. We need to spend more time on research and innovation. We need to enhance active student participation in the class, arouse competitions and contests among students. Professors of Hijawi needs to be better onliners, and you can apply this to any college actually. Professors and doctors, they need to be better onliners, and they need to teach their students to be better onliners, that they can work online. You don't have to complain about there's no jobs in the market. No, you can work online. You just need to know about it. We need to let our students be aware of all this. I will just finish by this true story by Ayman Hijawi. He says that for 5 years in his company, he was trying to implement an ERP solution, financial solution. And the finance department was resisting that because they were afraid that once that was started, they will get fired. But when that was imposed and enforced upon them, the business grew. And when the business grew, all the people that were afraid of being fired, they were utilized in logistics. So what he's basically saying, that exponential growth will create a new world of opportunities. Hence, current employees will be replaced, not replaced. So they're going to be utilized somewhere else. I will just remind you that we are still here at this very intersection point where the linear curve crosses the exponential trend, and that a word of chaos and amazement is still ahead of us. We're only 1% down the road. If we have not transformed ourselves, our institutions, our universities, our companies, our business models from linear to exponential, then it will not only seem as though our competition is racing away from us, but that we are sliding backwards at the breakneck speed into oblivion. Well, thank you for your attention, and that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you very much for this amazing delivery and amazing presentation. I just want to بدي أسألك سؤال، بدنا نحكي بالعربي يعني بالعربي والإنجليزي. أنا سؤالي إنه هل هذا الإكسبوننشال هو محير في الفعل؟ هل هو يعني good, bad, fearful, or beneficial? I don't know. Is it good for us? Sometimes I feel that it is frightening me. It is really something that you think it is going to take us nowhere. And sometimes you think it's good. There are benefits, especially in medicine,
yes,
and stuff like this. And sometimes you think it is intriguing.
Yeah. Okay. So myself, I'm always like being optimistic. I look at the bright side of everything. I never looked at the dark side of anything. I guess this is what is happening in the world of technology, and this whole exponential trend taking place is something positive. We need just to know how to make to utilize that and to benefit from that. Okay, you don't have to be like, for example, I will tell you that the 500 top companies in the world, 93 of that was off the list. Why? Because they stayed linear. Okay. That means that any person, any one of you guys can start a project, can start a startup, establish a startup company that is going to start growing exponentially in a matter of few years. He might be one of the 500 of the top 500 companies in the world. That is doable. Okay, we need to just to believe in this.
دكتور فؤاد تفضل. انت ممكن
Thank you for your excellent presentation and inspiring presentation, in fact. I believe in order to have exponential thinking, we need to have what I call maybe exponential mindset. Unfortunately, our students are not taught in a way whereby they think exponentially, but they are, used to cram facts without, thinking creatively. And I think the World Bank report, the latest report, has, emphasized this point. For your recommendation or objectives, or what you call it, I would add not only revising the curricula of universities, but the school start from the beginning, from grade 1.
Exactly, yes.
And one more thing is we have to spend not only time on research, but also money. Because if we compare the Arab world, amount of money spent on research and development, it's way below the international standards. يعني بتحكي عن أقل من 1%، 1% و2 بالعشرة%. بينما تتحدث عن international standard حوالي 2.2 بالعشرة. في إسرائيل 4.3 بالعشرة. شكرا، يعطيك العافية.
Well, I don't know. As I agree with you, that is, it has to do with our mindset. We need to work on our kids from the early beginning to teach them how to think exponentially and stop being linear thinkers. It's a mentality, it's a culture that we need to learn. Yes, but we need to let them know about all this. All these stories. We need to tell them about Nokia, about Kodak, how they behaved, how they were disrupted, how they disappeared from the market because they stayed linear. I don't think that we need a lot of money we can start from scratch. Okay, you just need to have an innovative, disruptive idea. Think about like digital photography, how it disrupted chemical photography. Think about the wheels in the luggage. That is a disruptive idea, right?
We need minds, yeah.
We need to brainstorm and teach our students how to brainstorm innovative ideas, disruptive innovative ideas.
Yani think outside the box.
As I mentioned, about Instagram, it was 3 years in business, 13 people, only 13 employees. They were acquired by Facebook by $1 billion in a matter of 3 years.
Just 13?
Yes. Okay. So, you can start something from scratch and you can grow exponentially.
Sorry. Go ahead, Doctor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. شكرا جزيلا على هذا المحاضرة القيمة. أنا بدي أسأل عدة أسئلة. أول شيء شو تأثير هذا على الجامعات الأردنية؟ ربما بعدين بدنا نحتاج جامعة واحدة يمكن.
Yes.
القضية الأخرى، شو العوائق اللي برأيك ممكن تواجهنا في سبيل تطبيق هذا؟ وأنا بدي أذكرك في قضية الأونلاين في جامعة اليرموك.
Yes.
لما تبنوا قضية اللغة الإنجليزية. أنا كنت بسمع من أحد الزملاء في اللغة الإنجليزية بيقول إنه التعليم منحدر مع الأونلاين أكثر مما كان مع الأساتذة، لأنه إحنا بطلنا نشوف الطلبة صاروا يعتمدوا على أنك تعطي الطلبة وظائف، والوظائف هاي واحد بحلها والبقية بنقلوها، وبالتالي بعتقد أن التعليم انحدر في هذا المجال، مش صار أحسن. شكرا.
أنا بتوقع لا، I think إنه الأونلاين education هو حل هاي الشغلة. But we need to do it right. That's what we miss actually. I don't know. I know Dr. Islam is teaching online. No, are you?
There are ways that you can avoid plagiarism.
Exactly.
Yes, جامعة نفسها تستخدم system turnitin.com اللي هي a way to validate to avoid similar content.
Yes.
For example. أنا بتوقع الجامعة If they don't, they should. I know I have access to it. I don't know if the rest of the university does, but there are ways to avoid the negative aspects of online learning. أنا عارف دائما مثل ما حكى الدكتور يعني there's no face to face. You lose that touch, that one-on-one with
the interaction,
the interaction with the student.
Instructor and student.
There are benefits, and I'm sure there are a lot of disadvantages. I think what's wrong with introducing this type of advancement in this country is that you don't have the culture that could adapt that quickly. But culturally,
but you agree that we need to start, right?
There's always a first step. There's always a first step, and unfortunately, in my experience, to try to start something new, you have a high pressure of resistance.
Exactly.
And this resistance can sometimes, for me, Dr. Yahya Bilham also teaches organizational change. He's a big change agent, and this can sometimes affect him into implementing new change, that he has to sometimes take a step back.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there's too many people taking a step back because of the resistance.
Because the linear
trend is still strong. As I mentioned in my presentation,
the linear people. So.
No, Salim Ismail said to solve this problem, you have to establish the change or start the change on the site.
Right.
Set an example and infect everybody else. Everybody's going to be moving that way.
I think it's not only with technological aspect. I think also from a personal how do you become that, we call it the change agent or change champion, if you have so many pressures against you resisting? What do you do?
I would recommend that you guys buy the book by Salim Ismail. It's called The Exponential Organization. It gives you a procedure from A to Z of how to transform your institutions, yourselves, your companies, your business models from linear to exponential, and how to deal with that resisting agents.
If we follow this procedure from A to Z, we are linear now. That means we are linearly moved toward exponential, right?
You're right, but
it should be innovative. It should be innovative. Every case has special circumstances. In our case here, I think we don't need all people to become exponential. If you look around the world, you just said 13 people move one big company, make trillions.
Instagram.
If we have only 20% of our students become exponential, 20% of our academic become exponential, I think we can make the change.
I believe it works.
Minds. These 20% of the people can affect other people, I think.
I believe it works like a bug. Once you get infected, it becomes contagious, so you infect everybody else.
Exponentially spread it out.
Yeah, it spreads out. I forgot to talk about that.
If I could recommend a book on change, it's called "It Starts with One," and I think it's something that should be taught in every class. If you want to change, first you should really, you should change yourself.
Exactly.
In order to infect others.
Believe in the idea.
With positive change, positive change.
Change yourself.
Dr. Mohammed.
About universities. I believe that we cannot compete with the online the MOOCs that I mentioned, the massive open online courses like edX, for example. It is an online education platform that provides online education for free. Okay, there's plenty, unlimited number of online courses that you can study for free. All you need, if you want to get accredited, certified, if you want to get certified, you have to pay a small fee to get the certificate at the end. So I guess we cannot compete with that because they are very professional. But we can build on the positive points that we own. Like at Yarmouk University, we can work with the humanities. We can utilize the Arabic language. We can use Arabic as the language of instruction. I guess that would be attractive for 2 million students in the Arab and Islamic world that are interested to learn Arabic,
online Arabic,
Sharia, from all over the world. Okay, they don't have to come to Jordan, and we have to remember that Jordan is a moderate Islamic country. It's not an extreme country. Okay, we need to utilize that. I guess that's an attractive point.
Thank you for your fine presentation. I just have a question to you. If you were to be a president of this university, yes, would you consider turning it to a paperless e-university?
I will.
Well, if you will, would you consider the negative consequences on the labor force in this university? Would you have plans to, deal with the redundant people that will be, you're talking about, 8,000 people in this university. Have you ever thought about this complication?
I believe I have.
Thank you.
Like 100% believing that this transformation from linear to exponential will create unlimited opportunities that will create new jobs. So current employees will be replaced rather than, as I mentioned in my slide, they're going to be replaced. They're not going to be replaced. They're not going to be out. You can utilize them in new jobs, okay? Because this whole transformation to exponential will create unlimited number of jobs. So you can utilize them. So I guess we don't have to worry about that.
You have to wait for another generation to come, not this generation.
When? We have to start. If we think that way, then we don't have to do anything.
Yes, I agree. We have to have a different mindset, but even the mindset of students. But I just add, not just the students, mindset of decision makers. Key decision makers have a different mindset. Exactly. You have to turn their mindset to e-mindset in order to start your project.
You're right. But I'm optimistic because the president of Yarmouk University is very excited about this. I have the privilege to present in front of him and in front of the Council of Deans, and they were very excited about this. So, the top of the pyramid are already excited to do this whole
Dr. Sami.
It's just a matter of time and a matter that we need to believe in this. We need to start. We need to infect our students. We need to teach our students how to be exponential thinkers and stop being linear thinkers. I believe that way. I don't know if you guys believe.
Dr. Sami, if every generation just waiting to have a new mind, we will never change. We have to start. Even with one person, we will have another one, and we exponentially move up. The people will accept the change. If every generation accepts new mind to come, it will never come. We have to start.
But organizational politics must be considered.
Of course.
Doesn't it?
But if you raise the flag and you start, you will find good people from here and here start support you. You need to start.
From a purely scientific point of view.
Yes.
What reality on the ground says probably something else. Organizational politics is a concept that we deal with in business and in management. So we have to deal with that as well.
Right, but I know that even the king and Prince Hussein in his last speech, he talked about the connected world. So he's already aware of what is going on in the world of technology. I guess online education is going to be moving on.
I think we can take this point just to convince them you have to change. After 5 to 10 years, if Harvard University opened online education and your son went to attend a university, are you going to advise him to come to Yarmouk or to take online in Harvard or just for $1,000? No, I'm talking about the university here. If you need to convince them, just tell them that after 5 years, you will never find students. All people will turn to online. If you don't shift or change, you will lose your customers.
Yeah, we need to stop the chalk and talk typical method of teaching.
Excuse me. I think excitement is not enough. Deeds is heard more than words. I do have an example about this. لو في المكتبة مثلا كان المفروض انهم يعملوا داتابيس للارتكلز او الاشياء اللي منشورة في اللغة العربية. يعني زي إبسكو أو شيء من هذا القبيل، وهذه العملية صار لها يمكن 15 سنة وهم قاعدين بس بيجمعوا المعلومات وهم مش قادرين يرفعوها مرة واحدة. فيعني اذا احنا مش قادرين نعمل هذا، كان ممكن يكون يعمل اكسبوننشال يعني ديفلوبمنت يعني في جامعه اليرموك، لكن للاسف انه يعني it's not being done.
You can't do everything all at once. I mean, as I mentioned, you need to implement something on the side and move from there. Exactly, yeah. And be optimistic. That's
بس دفاعا عن جامعة اليرموك بالخطة الاستراتيجية 2015-2020 they have formulated certain steps to
move online,
I don't want to say globalize, but make this university more technologically savvy, which includes formulating online classes يعني. So it's the first step. هي صعبة مرات مثل ما حكى الدكتور، في challenges ومرات الresources مش موجودة. But this is a good example of your presentation of what we need to take a step forward to create the change. So, yeah, من دفاع. ما هو بالformulation في خطوات، ما هو nothing happens مثل ما حكى الدكتور محمد، ما في شيء overnight. دائما يعني هسه بتروح تزرع لك شجرة، but you first start with the seed, you water it, you take good care of it, and إن شاء الله جامعة اليرموك will flourish مع وطن الأردن. هيا شكرا لك.
أنا يعني ما بنكر إنه دور الفرد ممكن يأخذ المبادرة، بس لكن هلا ليش مثلا سيليكون فالي معظم الاختراعات والاكسبوننشال ثينكينج جاي منها؟ لأنه كمان في عندك environment فيها الحكومة، الجامعات فاين هناك، المنهاج. مع انه على فكره في السيليكون فالي في عندك ناس من الشرق الاوسط من بلادنا، مرة اكثر من 1000 واحد منهم متميزين في الشرق الاوسط، 38% اصلهم من الهند او يحمل الجنسيه الهنديه من القاره الهنديه خلينا نقول. فاذا انا بحكي عن الانفايرمنت صح الفرد، بس الفرد لوحده لما نعمل اكسلريشن، انت كنت تحكي عن الاكسلريشن لو مش هيك دكتور؟ فلما يكون في عندك كمان تشجيع من الدوله، يعني مناخ البحث والتطوير، كل هاي الاشياء بتساعد في الاكسلريشن ولا لا؟
Yes, you're right. But I mean, we need to to benefit from what is happening in the world. Okay, as I mentioned, we don't have to complain about not having jobs in Jordan, for example, for not having oil in Jordan. We have technology that is growing exponentially. We need to benefit from that. We just need to let our students and ourselves be aware of all this. I mean, you can work online from the comfort of your very home. You're doing this already.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, so much. Another question, final question, if you have any comment or question. Thank you for attendance. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
يعطيك العافية.
كل شيء فرصة سعيدة، حياك الله. ثلاث أغراضك بس. أوكي خلاص انتهيت منه.